Hey, it's you-man from KC95 here. Good evening and welcome to Toasted Tavern. Your host, Scott Tobin, and the man called Wags are ready to bring you the night in sports. So pull up a stool, grab a drink, and let's get toasted.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Scott and Wags at the Royals Hall of Fame here at Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City, and we are joined by the head of the Hall of Fame, Curt. Curt, good to see you again. Want to introduce yourself and talk just a little bit about the Hall of Fame here?
Yeah, so welcome in. It's
you.
good to see you guys at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum yesterday and here in the Royals Hall of Fame today. And we're in the lobby of the Royals Hall of Fame. We sort of call it the clubhouse lobby, with the idea that the three retired numbers are here behind us in sort of clubhouse display. And then everything that you see on the Ashwood wall around when you walk into this lobby is actual headlines and things from different periodicals and newspapers. And it's all of Kansas City baseball history, not just the Royals. It's all of Kansas City baseball history, which goes all the way back professionally, all the way back to 1884. So all of our predecessor teams are represented in this Ashwood wall. And of course, there's a lot of Royals history in there as well, but especially more recent Royals history on the back side of the wall here. But so when we come in here, we always like to make sure that people understand that we know baseball wasn't invented in 1969, and it certainly we didn't first come to Kansas City in 1969 with the Royals, so we like to cover those teams that came before us as well.
Yeah, I've seen some really neat things on the walls about the Monarchs, some of the Negro League things. You know, there's a really neat one right there about Babe Ruth coming to play. That was really cool. That caught my attention, I know, as I walked in. And then seeing the Satchel Paige jersey over there too is always a really very cool moment.
You know, Satchel, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of his induction into the National Baseball Hall of Fame last week. And we were fortunate enough that the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, our friends there, actually brought his plaque to the Royals Hall of Fame on that 50th anniversary date on August 9th, and it was a very, very special evening. Of course, we went to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum the following day with it, so it's a really exciting time.
That would have been really neat to see. I'm sorry that we weren't here to get to catch that, but I'm sure it was exciting. And you talked about Major League Baseball being here. I also noticed the A's, some A's stuff on the wall over there. So the Kansas City A's were here in the Major Leagues.
The Kansas City A's was sort of a return to Major Leagues. You know, we had the Federal League was here in 14 and 15, so we had a Major League team there. And then the Blues were in the American Association in the late 19th century, so that was a Major League in the Union Association. And now the Monarchs are part of the Major League history as well. But getting back into the American League, we were in the founding of the American League when it was the Western League in 1899 and 1900 when it first took the name American League, but we sort of lost out when they became a major league in 1901. That team moved to Washington and later moved to Minnesota. So the Minnesota Twins are actually the Kansas City Blues. But and then the A's, of course, on their migration from east to west, they made a stop here in Kansas City for a decade or so. And of course, what's interesting about that, they never had a winning season in their time in Kansas City, but colorful characters, including the second owner, Charlie Finley, a colorful character. They actually changed their colors here in Kansas City. When they came here, they were blue and red. By the time they left here, they were green, gold, and white. And it's a wedding gown green, Fort Knox gold, and wedding gown white, Kelly green, and Fort Knox gold. Finley was very specific about which colors they were. And but they left after they left in '67. That was sort of the impetus to get an expansion team, and of course that's where Royals history begins there, with getting the guarantee for that expansion team in '67 to play in '69, and that's sort of where Royals history begins. And that's when we go in the gallery. That's sort of where Royals history begins. Is we go back to the 1969 and start from there.
While we're standing right here, we've got these three Hall of Famers here who are, of course, legends in Royals history, and George Brett, Frank White, and the late Dick Hauser. Talking a little bit about their impact on the Royals, I guess, is we're right here.
Yeah, so these are our three retired numbers. We only have three. We also have obviously 42, which we feel we have a special connection to. because Jackie, as I said before, we can now say that Jackie Robinson made his major league debut with the Kansas City Monarchs in 1945. He made his National League debut with the Dodgers in 1947. So that's a sort of a distinction now we can make, and that's fun. So we feel like we have a tie to that number 42, but we certainly have a tie to numbers 5, 10, and 20 in Kansas City. George, number 5, almost needs no introduction. Most people, if you're a baseball fan, you know who George Brett is, one of the greatest players of his era, and he sort of embodies everything about Kansas City and the Royals, and he's still a part of the organization. So we're always, it's always fun, and he was part of the Page celebration last week. So it was nice to have our Hall of Famer out there with the Hall of Fame plaque. Dick Hauser, of course, he played here with the aforementioned A's. He made his major league debut playing for the A's, and was an all-star actually in his rookie season with the Kansas City A's, and then would come back years later and manage the Royals, and of course managed us to several playoff appearances, including 1985 when we won the World Series. And we'll leave it at that. At least for now. And then there's Frank White. Frank White, a great Kansas City story, because he was he wasn't born here. He was born in Greenville, Mississippi, but he was raised here in Kansas City. Moved here when he was about 3 years old, and still lives here now. And he came through the Royals Baseball Academy. And that's a real interesting part of Royals history and baseball history as well. And he's sort of the poster child for that really interesting time in Royals history. And of course, he made the big leagues, eventually played for his hometown team his entire career with his hometown team, won 8 Gold Gloves, hit cleanup in only the second baseman to ever hit cleanup in a World Series. The one before that was Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson had been a second baseman that hit cleanup in the World Series. And he was also the MVP of the 1980 American League Championship Series when we finally beat the Yankees and won our first pennant. So a really, really important player in Royals history and a really important figure in Kansas City history.
We're back inside the Royals Hall of Fame. We're still here with Curt Nelson. And Curt, we're going to get into a little bit of the origins of the Royals now, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, so, when the A's left town, it was always that the Kansas City had a major league team, but it wasn't Kansas City's major league team. And that was really the effort behind the Royals. It was like we had a major league team again, but we didn't. They were never really Kansas City's team. So the full effort was to make Kansas City's major league team. That's really what the Royals' DNA and where it all comes from, and what we like to think is still the fact today, and still have that sort of ethos to the whole thing. And this case has a lot of the sort of founding things in Royals history. So you think about, well, the name. Why the name Royals? That's always an interesting one for all teams, about why the name Royals. And a lot of people don't. If you're from Kansas City, you might know the story, but some people don't. And it is a tie to Kansas City in the fact that the name comes from the American Royal Livestock and Horse Show, which goes all the way back into the late 19th century. And it was an important cultural event in Kansas City and economic event in Kansas City for many years. It still exists today. Its biggest function in Kansas City now is the American Royal Barbecue Competition. So it's melded into the other Kansas City cultural iconic thing in barbecue, which is the best barbecue in the world. But that's fighting words, I know. But we will fight Carolina and Texas and Memphis and wherever else. But so that's really where the Royals name comes from, and the name came from a name the team competition or entry system from fans. And Royals was the one that received the most entries. And Mr. Kaufman, who was the founder of the Royals, Mr. and Mrs. Kaufman, they decided that was a very good name, so they decided to go with it. And so of all the entries that were submitted Royals, they selected one that would sort of represent the idea of why the name Royals. And we still have that letter. That letter was, you can see it right there. His name was Sanford Port, and he lived in Overland Park. And he was an engineer. If you look at his handwriting, you can tell he's very precise about his handwriting. He was an engineer. And he goes into sort of chapter and verse about the American Royal and that sort of thing. And it goes through and has a lot of the origin stories. And then our logo was sort of and it really hasn't changed much. We've changed it just ever so slightly over the years. It's really been the same the whole way through. And it was designed, if you know Kansas City, you know Hallmark Cards was founded here. And so obviously Hallmark would have a hand in it. So they opened it up to graphic designers at Hallmark to design a logo. And this was... different artists put them in, and they went to a committee, and no one's ever sure who exactly picked it, but this was the one that was chosen. It was by a gentleman by the name of Shannon Manning, who still lives here in Kansas City. And he hadn't lived in Kansas City very long at this time. He had been living in Chicago, and he moved to Kansas City to work at Hallmark. And so he came up with this very simple but elegant design that we still have today. The big R is kind of gone now, and it's just the KC, and we've gone with the script that has been on our uniforms from the very beginning as the Royals instead of sort of that more block style. But that's it. It hasn't really changed much over the years. And like I said, it was a Kansas City effort, right? So this was a Kansas City. It wasn't designed by somebody outside of Kansas City. It was designed by people here in Kansas City. So it's trying to be Kansas City's team in every way possible.
And that would be a proud moment to be here working for Hallmark and then be able to say, hey, I designed the logo for a major league team, and years later still being the same.
He's such a wonderful gentleman, and he's so soft spoken and everything. But he does say that he says it's one of the. He worked on so many things. He's such an artist, and he later worked in these intricate paper designs where you would open up a card and there'd be a whole scene inside the card. He's a magician at it. And so, but he always says that of all the things he did in his time at Hallmark, that the designing of the Royals logo stands right up there because he sees it everywhere, and he sees it on little kids still wearing it today, and he takes great pride in it. So.
And it's one of those iconic logos in baseball. You see it and you immediately know, oh, that's the Royals. It just stands out. It
is. It's one. I always say if you silhouetted out all the logos and just tried to, and you had a baseball fan and had them pick which one it is, there's a lot of them that might be a little bit hard for people to figure out because a lot of them are circular or whatever. If you silhouetted out the Royals logo, it'd be no problem. That's the Royals, right. And you really want that. And he did just a fantastic job with it.
Our next stop on the tour, we're going to get into a little bit of the Royals Baseball Academy. And let's hear a little bit of the history of that.
This is one of my favorite exhibits because it's really a contribution that the Royals made early in our history that really impacted all of baseball. It wasn't just the Royals that it impacted. And the idea was the Royals founder, Ewing Kauffman, he was an entrepreneur of incredible proportions and was always sort of an outside-the-box thinker, trying to think of ways that things could be different. It's like, why do we do it this way? Is there a better way of doing it? And one of his ideas at the time was, okay, how do we build a team? And this was before the advent of free agency. So really the only way you could acquire players is through the draft. The draft did exist, or through trades. And, that was really the main way of doing it. And he thought, what if there were a way that we could go out and find good athletes? Maybe they're not, maybe baseball isn't even their primary sport, or maybe they've never played baseball at all. And are there skills that are teachable, and we could teach them to be able to do this, and have a school where we would send them, and they would have this intensified instruction. So that's what they did, and it was the Royals Baseball Academy, and they held tryouts all over, from border to border up into Canada, and they had very specific things they were looking for as far as eyesight, and they tested eyesight, speed and agility, and if you were selected, they would basically give you a scholarship, go down to the Royals Baseball Academy, intensified baseball instruction. But Mr. K also believed that these young men should go to school as well to learn some essential skills. He was very interested in them learning business and financial skills, because he viewed it, if they were successful in baseball, they needed to be able to take the money that they were making and take care of it, and speaking and that sort of thing. So there was Manatee Community College, which was right across the highway from where the Royals Baseball Academy was in Sarasota, Florida. So they would go there in the afternoon, in the mornings, and then they would come back and intensified instruction in baseball in the afternoons and the evenings. The fun thing that for me anyway is to think that they did this because they had kids from all over the United States that came down there. The best one that they found was actually about 3 blocks from the ballpark in Frank White, 3 blocks from our home ballpark here in Kansas City. But it is how Frank got involved in baseball, because Frank would tell you that he probably would not have played professional baseball had it not been for the Royals Baseball Academy. He did not play high school baseball because Lincoln High School, which actually is right above the third base, what would have been the third base line at Municipal Stadium at 22nd Brooklyn, they did not have a baseball team. But he played in the amateur leagues around here, the Van Johnson League and other places. And so he had sort of a reputation of being a decent player. And some of the gentlemen that were involved in that, some of them former Negro League players, especially Bob Motley and a couple of others, were coaches in that league. And they sort of recommended that he should go down to Municipal Stadium. They're holding these tryouts for this Royals Baseball Academy. You should go. And he was working at the time, and he asked for his boss to get time off to go down and work out and do that, which he did, and he got an invite, and that's sort of how his career begins, because he didn't really have a chance to play college baseball, although he would have liked to have, I think. And this was his way into baseball, and it was sort of a rapid ascent, really. And by 73, this would have been in 70, and by 73 he was in the big leagues. So that's and for Cardinal fans, you sort of understand this a little bit, because you know how many great players Whitey managed in St. Louis. And Whitey always says, he jokes a little bit, because he says when people ask him who's the greatest player you ever managed, he'll say it depends on where I am. He says if I'm in St. Louis, I'll say Ozzie Smith. And if I'm in Kansas City, I'll say it's George Brett. He says if I'm in Columbia, I'll mention them both. But he also said about Frank White is that Frank White was the greatest second baseman he ever saw. He said especially on defense, he said every play you need a second baseman to play, he could make with ease. He'd come in on the ball, he could go out, he could go range to either side. Amazing leaping ability and timing and agility. He played the game with tremendous grace, and so he was just a joy to watch, and we got to watch him here in Kansas City. And he came through the Royals Baseball Academy, and some of those aspects of the Royals Baseball Academy, intensified instruction, some of the first use of video, which is so ubiquitous now, but some of the first use of video at the time, Charlie Lau was one of the guys that was involved with it. And so there were a lot of just interesting things, and a lot of the aspects of it are sort of used by every team has an academy somewhere in Latin America, a lot of them in the Dominican, and some of the aspects of that spring from the Royals Baseball Academy. So it's sort of a unique contribution that the Royals made early on to baseball as a whole.
Yeah, that's amazing that Mr. Kaufman had that insight to think of that in the 70s, and then to find a legend like Frank White that way and start his career. And then, like you said, the fact that he was also interested in them going to school too, so that they knew how to work their money and do those things. You don't hear about owners caring about their players like that real often.
He always said, and he was very successful in the fact that Mr. K started his own pharmaceutical company, and he did that. He did so because he got out of the war. He came back from the war. He had served in the Navy, and he was always good with numbers. And he would play cards on the Navy ship that he was on. and he was probably counting cards. He was good with numbers, and his shipmates called him lucky because he would always win the pots, and he would just stash this money when he got back here. And then he was looking for a job, and he said he looked in the want ads, and it said pharmaceutical sales, come down and take an aptitude test. And he goes, I knew nothing about pharmaceuticals, but he goes, I like taking tests. So he went down and he took this test, and he got the job, and he was so good at selling that it was a commission job, and he was so good at it that before long he was making more than the regional manager. So they cut the size of his territory, and he thought, well, that's not right. So he decided, I'm going to start my own company. So he made calcium tablets out of oyster shells.
Oh, wow.
And he started the company partially with the winnings from the Navy, and that became a multi-billion-dollar international company. And he always said that, you know, he wasn't big on putting his name on things, bricks and mortar, as he would call them. He was more interested in the influence. If he had a legacy, it would be on the people that he influenced, either those directly or through the Kauffman Foundation. Now he's been gone for, you know, more than a quarter of a century, and he's still making an impact in Kansas City every single day. And so that's really the legacy that he has. And the Royals are a fun part of his legacy. It's a small part, but an important part, because baseball is important, and he thought baseball was important. So. And this was, of course, this would be sort of viewed as his contribution to the game itself, not just the Royals.
And that's a huge contribution to be on the forefront of such an important thing like an academy like that. Like you said, that is still going on in Latin America and all over the place, all over the world in Major League Baseball.
A little bit of outside the box thinking that never hurt anybody, and it's like if you can come across that good idea that works, and this was a good idea that worked.
And now we move on to the next exhibit here at the museum, and these are some of the giveaways and things that you guys have done as promotions at Kauffman Stadium over the years. And I know you took a special place in your heart for some of this stuff, so let's get into this.
I do. You know, in this case, we sort of present the idea of promotions and special events going all the way back to the starts at Municipal Stadium, because you can see, I don't know if we get away with it anymore, but it was Hot Pants Night in 1969, which I don't think we could get away with that one anymore. But the sort of the crux of the display in here has become a collection of bobbleheads, and what you see in here is every bobblehead that's ever been a giveaway. And there's actually one in here that's sort of an Easter egg that wasn't given away. But sometimes I hear fans say that they do have that one, and I'm like, no, you don't, because there's only like 3 of those, and I know where all 3 of them are. It's like an Easter egg in here. But they've, over the years, and people love them, and we just continue to do them. And from a Royals Hall of Fame perspective, we have had a Royals Hall of Fame series, which we've done over the years, and our most recent one being Whitey Herzog, which we gave away during this particular series, Cardinals Royals series. And he's made his way into the case now. And so I helped a little bit on that one, because they asked what should the Whitey pose be, and I said, well, I always remember him. It comes from a specific era in the 70s, and we would wear this into the 80s. But the satin blue jacket, so it's got to put the satin blue jacket on him. And Whitey always had a tendency to want to put his hands in his back pockets and stand like this when he was overlooking his team or having a friendly conversation with an umpire. And so we went ahead and did that and had him put his hands in his back pocket.
And St. Louis fans can definitely relate to that, because if you had him in the red satin jacket, we remember those days at Busch Stadium with him doing that exact pose. Yes,
switched his blue for red.
Yep.
Dick Hauser, who would follow him, not directly, but a couple of years later, sort of had a similar thing. It's the same era, so he would often wear that jacket as well. And Dick's bobblehead is down there, and he always had, at least early in the game, sometimes he would put his foot on the top step of the dugout and sort of lean, and so that's sort of his pose there. Cookie Rojas, former Cardinal, that's him. He's about to turn a double play, and he actually goes with with our Freddie Patek bobblehead, who formed our double play combination there on our first couple of championship teams, Whitey's teams. And if you put them sort of side by side, they're getting ready to turn a double play.
All kinds of really neat bobbleheads there. I even see a Buck O'Neill there.
There is a Buck O'Neill. Yeah, that's Buck in the Buck seat. If you've been to Kauffman Stadium, you know we still have a tradition where somebody in the community who has served the community in some way gets to sit in Buck's seat. And Buck, you know, that is him sitting in his seat, and you can see he's sort of taking notes because in his latter years he was a scout for the Royals, and he had been a scout for other teams as well. So he was a constant presence at Royals games right there in the second row, first seat, second row, and he was always there taking his notes. So there he is in his Monarchs cap and his Royals jacket.
What is this?
Isn't that great? That is from the opening of Royal Stadium, now known as Kauffman Stadium, back in '73. So the ushers wore these capes. I would think it would have been rather hot in the summer to wear a cape, but the ushers, or usherettes, if you want to call them, wore the cape. The ushers wore vests. Unfortunately, I don't have one of the vests. You can see the gentleman in that one picture is wearing one of them, but you can see the young lady there has the cape on. So
as somebody that's worked as an usher at Busch Stadium, I can't imagine wearing something like that in the heat of the summer in Kansas City or St. Louis.
Be a little too hot,
yes.
I would think.
Hey, it's U-Man here from Casey. For all your sports news, catch the Toasted Tavern with Scott Tobin and the Man Called Wags weeknights at 9 p.m. You can follow Toasted Tavern on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Let's get toasted.